Hey there. The sensual sounds of the Prison Wallets podcast.
Oh, yeah, Prison Wallets.
Oh, that sounds so good. I'm monitoring it in my ears and I'm just getting... All right, I didn't like that. So, hey, I'm Keith. This is Ray. This is the Prison Wallets podcast. And this is, what are we going to call this? Like the Prison Wallets?
Loose change episode.
Yeah, the extra deposit in the prison wallet. I don't know, people could take that a lot of ways, but I like to think of it like a penis that goes inside your ass and then shoots jizz inside.
Because a prison wallet is an asshole.
Oh,
we
is that
are
what that?
assholes.
I was just, that's funny. It means that because I just was thinking about dicks. I didn't even. Anyway, so this is going to be, instead of a movie commentary, this is going to be a little bonus podcast where we're going to talk about podcasts. But before we do, I had something else in mind that I just wanted to quickly talk about since we do like horror movies, right? And the whole idea is like to be scared. And most movies, I think, don't scare probably most people. I don't know. I guess I do know people that are like, oh, I can't watch this movie. There's too much blood or whatever. People that get scared in movies. I mean, not that it never happens to me, but I'm not usually scared in movies. But I used to think like I miss being scared. Like when I was a kid, like the Unsolved Mysteries theme song would make me scared, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it had that sound. You had an expectation.
Right, and I would miss those days of that feeling of being scared. But the reality of being scared as an adult is it fucking sucks, because I was just thinking how I was out on your balcony and it's dark out and I'm just scared of heights anyway. But in the daytime, you know, it's like I got a sense of things and whatever. But I noticed when I was out there, just because it's dark, and I started just losing perspective on like, how high up are we? Where's
floors,
the ground? Yeah, exactly. And I just started feeling real weird. And it reminded me of when I was in Vancouver last winter. There's this like old growth or medium growth forest in Surrey that, you know, the park closes at 10 p.m. You're not supposed to go in. But it's like a 25 minute walk through. And I had the little flashlight on my phone and I'm like, fuck it, my house is through there. And it might be fun. I'll go be scared. And I was so fucking scared, like about 15 minutes deep of being in, it's just a park, you know, it's like a path through the woods. But I just, after a while, I couldn't stop thinking of like, what if some Leatherface guy runs out of these woods right now? What am I going to do? And once the idea got in my head, it wouldn't go away. So I guess that's all I'm trying to say is that being scared is scary. It sucks. It's not fun at all.
But in regards to horror movies and being scared or attempting to get scared, that's the fucking point of them.
Right.
The point is to be watching something that gives you that emotion of fright, that gives you a sense of desperation or terror or suspense. And people that want to water down horror movies into these PG-13 ticket-selling big screen events are totally missing the point of what horror has always been. And now that movies are starting to become R-rated again, like they're kind of saying like, okay, I guess people are grown-ups and they want to see these movies, so we're going to throw out some R-rated stuff like Halloween, It, stuff like that, Hereditary, you know, R-rated movies that are doing well, and they're seeing that they're doing well financially, so they're going to make more, which is very important in my opinion, because I've always been a fan of the R-rated horror. If for no other reason, then you're going to see an R-rated movie. You're going to see something that's meant for adults, and if you can't handle it, then you don't go to it. Like, you're an adult, you have that choice. But I don't want to go to a movie theater to see a movie that's supposed to be, quote, scary or a horror movie and be looking over my shoulder every 2 minutes, not because I'm worried about what's behind me, because that would be cool, but because there's a gaggle of kids behind me that I'm giving a death stare, like, shut the fuck up.
It is nice too, yeah, like even outside, I guess more so outside of horror movies, but stuff like Deadpool, you know, is like bringing back the R rating of just like,
and it earns its rating, like it really does.
Yeah, and it made like so much money. Like, it's not like, oh, we made an R-rated movie and it did okay. It's like, we made an R-rated movie and it's insanely successful. So yeah, it's nice.
Yeah, they made the movie for like $50 some odd million, like the first one, and it made like $800 million before it hit Blu-ray.
But I guess, yeah, that's just it's just what was on my mind. Just being scared is scary. That's all. It's like, it's hard to be scared, you know? Like, I guess maybe that's kind of what roller coasters and shit are about too. So I don't know. Just I guess because like that's what I was trying to convince myself when I was on that balcony, and I had to come in and pee anyway. But I'm like, just enjoy it, man. Enjoy that you're feeling scared. It's like you're not actually in danger, so just have fun with it. But I couldn't. I can't. It's not fun to be scared. It's like scary. It's the dumbest thing I could ever say. But
I mean, going back to the movie part of things, the last time a movie gave me any sort of sense of, I guess, suspense, like I was worried about what was going to happen to the characters, was Sinister.
Right.
Actually, Sinister, the Scott Derrickson movie, it was so good, so effective at what it did, and I mean the sequel, while unwarranted, was still pretty decent.
But yeah, I agree. I only saw Sinister like last year, and it's funny because like I was just gonna say that I think it helps if you're in the theater and you're kind of stuck with the movie. You can't pause it, you can't stop. But Sinister was the opposite for me. I watched it on my phone, but that worked too because I was just like, it's just me in this movie. Like it's right up by my face, and I'm just staring into it, and yeah, it freaked me out good, man. It really did get me good.
They need to make more like that. Like, there needs to be more movies with these original ideas, because rehashing something, keeping on making all of these remakes, while some of them are great, really a lot of them sort of fall flat.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so that was the Divergence in Our Divergence podcast, the side topic in our side topic podcast. But the actual topic is other podcasts if we want to shout out, because they're cool.
Yeah, I mean, I've only been listening to podcasts for about a year now, and I've gone through a bunch, you know. I mean, I've listened to, I don't know, 50 or 60 different podcasts, kind of trying to find my way,
right.
What I'm interested in, or who's good at talking about the shit that I like to listen about. And I think I finally got it nailed down pretty much. You know, I've got a handful of podcasts that I like to listen to. My two main topics that I listen to podcasts about personally are true crime / serial killers and movies, specifically horror movies.
Right. Whereas for me, it's basically video games and pro wrestling. So my list won't really be appropriate to this podcast so much, but I'll throw them in anyway. Why not?
It doesn't matter. I mean, realistically, it's kind of like the podcast that we're doing kind of not only reflects movies or our opinion about them, but our unique personalities as well.
And it's all, like pop culture. It's all just a big mishmash. Mm-hmm. One thing I've noticed ever since, because I got into podcasting early, is because I worked at that porn store in Vancouver, and I just had to listen to the radio all day. And then I learned about podcasting because I was looking up stuff about that TV show Firefly, and somebody was doing a podcast about Firefly, and I was like, what the fuck is a podcast? So I started looking it up, and back then it was like a lot of Harry Potter podcasts. Like, that was popular back then. But what I noticed back then, that is true then and is still kind of true now, is there's the two types of podcast hosts. There's the talent and there's the tech. So there's like the tech-minded people that are really good at the tech side of their podcasting and stuff and knowledgeable, but you just don't like to listen to them. They just have those voices that make you want to punch them in the face. And then there's the talent that are more like talkative people that are like way more fun to listen to, but sometimes their podcasts sound like shit and they don't know what's going on. And I don't know. I strive to be right in the middle. I want to be slightly entertaining, but also sort of technically proficient, you know. That's what I'm aiming for. I want to be not too nerdy to be annoying, just right on the edge.
Yeah, and I mean that difference, the tech versus talent thing, I'll get into that with a couple of podcasts that I listen to, because it definitely goes that way for a couple of them.
But then too, now that there's so many podcasts, this is the true tragedy when you find a podcast that isn't talent or tech. It's just some annoying guy who sounds like shit. You know, and then it's like, oh fuck.
Yeah. So you can go ahead. You can start it off.
Well,
I don't know how many
we'll
you
start
know.
With, I really only have one movie podcast that I've been keeping up with. I dip into movie podcasts here and there, but never one that I really stuck with. But what I'm listening to now that I like is it's these guys called Kinda Funny. It's this guy Greg Miller. He used to work for IGN, and he left to do his own thing. So they're mostly video game based, but they started this series called the MCU in Review, where they went through every Marvel Cinematic Universe movie and then ranked them. And then obviously they ran out of movies, so they moved on to they did the X-Men movies, and they're doing Spider-Man right now. And yeah, it's just good. It's like 5 dudes, and they all just sit around and like break down each one of those movies, and it's neat to listen to, especially the MCU one, because the MCU stretches way far back at this point, and it's interesting to hear them talk about, like Iron Man 2, and be like, why did everyone hate Iron Man 2? Like, it's actually real good. And it's interesting to get that perspective now on these movies as a whole.
Yeah, especially now that the Marvel Universe is where it is, right? Like, I mean,
yeah,
I'm a fan as well, so...
Yeah, and it's like had its ups and downs. There's definitely been some kind of bad Marvel movies, and they all have the problem of most of the endings are very bland and generic. But when you look at the whole thing, this is like a fucking miracle that they've made this many movies over this many years that are all pretty good and all connect. It's like, wow, nice job, especially when you look at the other side, and like DC is just shitting in their own face over and over.
It's ridiculous, like repeatedly.
Yeah, like when you think it can't get worse, it just gets worse. And like, holy fuck.
It's like a little kid that voluntarily goes back to his church after getting butt fucked.
Yeah. Well, like, do you remember when they announced that Ben Affleck was going to be Batman? And everyone was like, whoa, that's a bad idea.
I thought it was great.
Well, then he turned out to be easily the best part.
Absolutely.
Of those movies. And it's like, whoa. So, yeah, just...
I was pro Batfleck right from the start. Like,
I guess I wasn't pro him. I was hopeful, but it turned out so much better than I expected, that aspect of it, and every other aspect of it. Because that's the other thing that sucks, man. I actually like Zack Snyder a lot. Like, his Dawn of the Dead remake was awesome. Fucking 300 was pretty cool. Watchmen was great. I love Watchmen. And after that, it started getting pretty bad pretty fast. And it's like, what happened to this dude? He was so cool.
So edgy, and I mean,
and even like his style, yeah, like people made fun of in Watchmen that it was like the speed ramping and like, oh, the Zack Snyder style, and maybe it wasn't really appropriate to Watchmen, but it's still cool. It still looks cool, and yeah, man, I don't know, holy fuck, just like nowadays, no one's a Zack Snyder fan anymore. How can you be? It's ridiculous. He just sucks. But anyway, so yeah, for movies, that's my thing. I would definitely recommend is MCU in Review. Kindafunny.com. It's on YouTube and shit. And yeah, those guys are good.
Okay, I'm going to start out with... Let's see, I'm going to actually start out with the one that I make sure I listen to almost every time it comes out right away. Because I usually collect before I start listening. So... I'm going to talk about From My Parents' Basement. They're based out of Hamilton.
Nice, near here.
Yeah, they're not far from here. It's 3 guys. There's Gary Pullen. He's an artist who's done work for Rue Morgue magazine. He's working on some stuff for Fangoria. He does work for Mondo, creating art for them, that gets sold. He's done cover art for Arrow Video Blu-rays, stuff like that. Like, I think he's a pretty big deal, and I think he's very talented. And then there's Eric Gadet and Aaron Lupton. Aaron Lupton, I think, works for Rue Morgue as well. I'm not sure what Eric Gadet does, but the 3 of them together have a really great rapport. They talk about horror movies and heavy metal mostly. Like, those are the 2 topics that kind of go hand in hand with them. So they talk about a lot of like 80s metal or concerts that they've gone to or people that they've met. Like, they hung out with Doyle and talked to Doyle from the Misfits, and of course his own solo stuff. They go to conventions because Gary tours the conventions and sells his art, and I assume he does well with it because he keeps on being able to do it. But when they meet someone like Dee Wallace or someone like that, they usually get them to record a little shout out for or an intro like you're listening to,
right,
From My Parents' Basement. So it's cool. They're good to listen to. They throw music clips. They have one of the best theme musics. It's like almost like someone switching a dial through a radio, and every time they stop it hits like another famous section of a popular song from a horror movie, like an 80s horror movie, like Man Behind the Mask from Friday the 13th Part 6, Shocker from Shocker, the Lost Boys theme music, like stuff like this.
Nice.
Yeah,
that sounds cool. I should check out that podcast. I feel like I might like that.
Yeah, it's pretty good. It's well done for sure.
That actually reminded me of, I haven't listened to it lately, so that's why I didn't remember it, but another movie podcast, just when you mentioned like the music, that I guess should go back and check. It's like this podcast I just jump into sometimes. I don't listen to all the time, but they're called Junk Food Dinner, and they pick 3 old weird B movies and review them, and they always play like a really cool song in between each review that kind of relates to the movie. And yeah, like, because I guess that's the thing, like I have a weird habit with podcasts that I don't subscribe to any podcasts. I always manually download them. So that's like how I unsubscribed from a podcast, is because I forgot to go download it. So like I guess I've been like mentally unsubscribed from Junk Food Dinner for a year, but now that I thought of it, I'm gonna go check them out. And yeah, like I think I found them, I don't know, I was just looking for, because they do themes sometimes, you know, like dumb bikini car wash movies and stuff, and I think that's how I found them. And then from there, I'm like, and it's such a good name, Junk Food Dinner, because you're just watching shitty movies, you know, like just trash. but yeah, they're pretty cool. I'll give them a shout out.
I also want to kind of talk about, let's go into serial killers a little bit. Criminology podcast. Criminology is headed by a guy named Mike Ferguson. Or no, it's not Mike Ferguson, it's Mike something else anyway. So he also does another podcast called True Crime All the Time, which has a lot more episodes, and it's about serial killers. But Criminology, the first season is all about the Zodiac Killer.
Nice.
Like, all about it. And then the second season was all about the Golden State Killer, which is a case I've been following pretty heavily for the last while. And now they've got a few, I guess they're doing a few random episodes until October, I believe. And then they're coming out with a third season, and they haven't announced who they're going to be talking about yet. Anyway, I learned about some serial killers through them that I had never heard of before, which is weird because I read a lot about that stuff.
Yeah, it's like there's new serial killers that you didn't know about.
And yeah, True Crime All the Time has more episodes, but Criminology, I like the format a little bit better. So the main guy, who has the more southern sounding accent, he's very charismatic sounding, very well versed. He knows what he's talking about. And not that the other people involved don't, like his 2 co-hosts, one for True Crime All the Time, one for Criminology, but the other guys just don't have a very big personality.
Right.
So it's like one guy he sounds animated, and the other guy's like, yeah, we just talked to this victim who survived, and yeah, that was terrible, wasn't it?
It's funny because I guess because podcasting, you know, it's all like, it's, you know, basically amateur broadcasting. So it's not like you go find a co-host or something. It's just like, who amongst my friends wants to do this with me? And if all your friends aren't, you know, charismatic people, what are you going to do? It's like, yeah, I guess this is what we're doing then. But what was I going to say with that too? I was going to say, I like that idea too of like spending like a season of the podcast on one guy. Because, you know, it would be easy to just do one podcast per one dude, but it's nice to get those like in depth. Like, let's just really fucking examine all the sides of this. Like, I like that. That's one of the cool things with podcasting.
I was right. It was Mike Ferguson who is the main co-host guy that I was talking about.
Cool.
Mike Gibson is his co-host on True Crime All the Time, and his co-host on Criminology he just calls his name's Morph. Like,
that's weird.
Yeah, a little bit. But anyway, those 2 other guys sound wooden. Like, they don't sound very animated at all. Like, they're talking about horrible things and, you know, people who might have survived, and just like, yeah, that was unfortunate.
Yeah. I guess that's just, I don't know, maybe that helps, you know, dispassionate, you know, if you're going to just talk about murders and death all the time.
I don't know, man. I can't not talk about another 2 that I really like because they share a co-host. One is the Pure Cinema podcast, and the other one is the Just the Discs podcast. Pure Cinema podcast is made up of Elric Kane, who also is on Shockwaves, which is Blumhouse's podcast, and Brian Sauer. And Brian Sauer does the Just the Disc podcast on his own, and occasionally he has a guest or whatever. So Pure Cinema podcast talks about all manner of movie. It's just everything, like old movies, new movies, it doesn't matter. Just the Discs is exactly like what it sounds. It's all about Blu-ray collecting, which really appeals to me.
Right.
So That's those.
Nice. Yeah, I guess that's
Those. That's great English.
yeah. Well,
That's them.
Whatever. Fuck English.
Yeah.
Fuck this language, man. Just how your fiance's kid is like learning stuff in school, and I felt just bad at the memories of like learning how to spell words. Like English is the most fucked up language. Like nothing makes any sense. Do you ever see? It's like I don't remember the sentence, but it's all these like this long sentence with all these words that are all spelled the same, but you pronounce them all a little different. Mm-hmm. And there's no way to know that unless you grow up like English second language people that are just like trying to learn English. Like good fucking luck. It's never gonna happen. But yeah, so I guess the only other stuff I really listen to a lot these days, so I'll just go over them quick because they don't really relate to this podcast. But for wrestling podcasts, there's this podcast called 1-900 Wrestling that they're on hiatus right now. But overall, they're good because what I find with like pro wrestling is so weird where I was a fan and then I stopped watching for like 10 years and then I came back. And I think that's important because it kept me from being bitter. Like I still have fun watching wrestling. But these people that started watching in like the late 90s and never stopped, they're the most bitter fucking jerk-offs in the world. Everything sucks. They just, all they can do is complain. And I mean, they're not wrong. Wrestling sucks. It's very, WWE specifically, badly written. They never follow through with storylines. The character motivations don't make sense. But if you haven't accepted that by now, why are you watching it? You know? Like,
Yeah,
so
I mean, it is what it is.
yeah, like it's just, there's no point in complaining anymore. It's not going to change. Vince McMahon is a billionaire. He's not going to change. So either you like it or you don't. So it's very hard to find podcasts where the people are positive. Like it's incredibly hard. So this show 1-900 Wrestling is nice because they don't hate wrestling. And the other one, it's more famous. It's the Sam Roberts Wrestling Podcast, where this guy Sam Roberts, he works on Sirius, used to be an Opie and Anthony guy, and he does stuff with WWE sometimes. But his podcast is nice because almost to a fault, like he likes wrestling too much. It's almost weird. Like he started watching in 1991, and he just never stopped. But he actually he believes in them. He's like, hey, what do you think's gonna happen with Braun Strowman? Like, you think this is how the story's gonna go? And it's like, oh, you're so naive. Like, of course that's not gonna happen because that would be cool. And the writers are terrible. But I just love that he has that feeling because that's what wrestling reminds me of. It's like when you were a kid and you played with like action figures, you know, like that's all it is. It's just you can't think of it like a real show or a real athletic thing. You got to think of it like action figures that a small child is controlling. and to me, that's when wrestling's fun. And that's why I like Sam Roberts' show, because that's how he thinks of it. He's like a man-child in a nice way.
I listen to, I don't currently listen to any or have any saved, but I've listened to a few wrestling ones. Like I listened to a few select episodes of Chris Jericho's podcast.
Oh yeah, that's true. That's a good show.
That's a good one because he has on wrestling and non-wrestling people, like music people and stuff. So it's cool.
And pretty much all those like interview style ones are good. Like Stone Cold has one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I listened to that one too. I have listened to that one too, and I enjoyed that one a lot.
Yeah, those are just neat because JR has one. But yeah, just people talking about the business. Yeah, those are all pretty cool. I give them a thumbs up too. Jericho's amazing too. Like, geez, just like he was awesome back in like 1999, and now that he's in his 40s, he's maybe more awesome. Like he's still doing crazy stuff in wrestling. He's showing up at like independent events in New Japan and doing all this cool shit.
I was going to mention that.
Yeah, and his band is like, I saw his band Fozzy in like 2003, and they weren't very good, but they're like better now. They had this song called Judas in My Mind.
Yeah.
It was actually like on the charts, and it's not my favorite song, but it's okay. It's not bad. And that's really all you can ask for.
I guess, yeah.
Yeah, he's like, as a joke, he calls himself the GOAT, the greatest of all time.
Yeah.
But he kind of is. He's real good. Like, he's been around for so long, and he just is always great.
I mean, I was always kind of an Austin guy, but I mean, I think everyone was, because everyone wanted to, like, stick it to the man, and this guy was sticking it to the man every fucking week. Like,
yeah, like, I think
even when he was losing, he was sticking it to someone.
That's what I think is, like, yeah, impressive, is, like, you do have those people that had the big moment. And I mean, arguably, Austin is the most famous, most successful, most money-drawn wrestler of all time. And Jericho never was popular like that. But that he's done it for more than 20 years is like, nice work, like that he keeps it going.
I mean, again, I don't really follow wrestling anymore. I was really big into it in the 90s, up into the early 2000s, and then I kind of just fell off the train. That doesn't mean I dislike it now. I just don't follow it. But I don't think anyone would say I'm wrong in saying that if it weren't for Steve Austin, pro wrestling would not be where it's at.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because even I got in just more with The Rock, but still, I mean, The Rock and Austin, like WrestleMania 17, still the greatest thing that ever happened in wrestling. It's never going to top that.
Yeah, it was definitely a great era.
Yeah.
I gotta give a shout out to Postmortem, Mick Garris's podcast. Mick Garris is a famous horror director. I don't know. I mean, I don't know that he would like to be described as famous, but I recognize him from many different things. He's a good guy. He likes to talk. He's a good speaker. He has interesting people on his podcast. He's had Robert Englund. He's had Ari Aster. He's had just so many people on his podcast, and it's always someone in the horror industry who's made films or been a star or a director or a writer or whatever. Like you have Mike Flanagan, the guy that directed Oculus and Gerald's Game.
Right.
He was on there, and he was really fun to listen to or listen about. He had the guy's name is Rihue. I can't think of his last name. He's Asian, but that was super interesting to listen to. But it's nice to listen to a guy who's been in the horror movie industry for as long as he's been. This guy directed Critters 2.
Right.
It's 30 years ago. It's fun to listen to a guy that you like talking to and about other people that you like.
Yeah, that's cool because it's similar to with those wrestling podcasts where wrestlers talk to each other. Instead of just a fan interview that doesn't know what to ask or doesn't know what to talk about. I do love these podcasts where it's people that are in the industry and know how it works and know what they're talking about, talking to other people in the industry, because you just get a different level of conversation where they all are on the same level and they know what's going on.
Exactly. They're all knowledgeable. No one's blowing smoke
or just asking stupid shit that doesn't apply or whatever.
Some notable episodes that I liked were the one with Fred Decker. Fred Decker was involved with the Monster Squad, and it's an important movie in my opinion. Ryuhei Kitamura was the guy I was trying to think of. David Arquette, of all people.
Right.
Sean S. Cunningham.
Man, David Arquette's had his fucking dick in a lot of pies because he was in WCW back in the 90s too, or in the 2000s.
Yeah.
Ruining everything. It's just it wasn't his fault, but
John Carpenter, Mike Doherty, Robert Shea, Jeffrey fucking Combs, Tom Holland, writer and director of Fright Night.
Nice.
If you want to hear really frank, candid conversations, this is a podcast that I highly recommend, especially if you're a big movie fan.
Sweet. So I think I've only got one more. Should I just rattle off my last one?
Yeah, rattle off your last one, and then I've got one more.
Cool. So I guess my other thing is I listen to a lot of video game podcasts, but I don't know, I'm starting to drift a little on video game podcasts because it's funny because most of the video game journalism scene, it's all focused around San Francisco, and they're so politically correct. It's uncomfortable to me. I don't like it, and they're just it's can't you just talk about video games? Come on, guys, there's everything have to be a fucking let's fucking change the world bullshit. I don't know. So the only podcast I've really stuck with is it's these guys called the Easy Allies. They used to be Game Trailers, and Viacom owned them, and they went out of business. So now they started their own thing, and they're doing so good on Patreon. Literally, they make $50,000 a month on Patreon. But
Jesus.
It's a lot of them. It's 8 guys, and I mean they're a little bit. I don't know. It's they also are this kind of oh, let's be politically correct, soft guys. They're those types of guys, but they don't talk about it all the time, and they don't bring it up. So that's good enough. I'll take it. You know? That's a weird thing, Catch-22, though, with especially Americans are so polarized. It's the left or the right, but I don't like either of them. The left are such namby-pamby, annoying people, but then the guys on the right that are trying to be more hey, fuck it, I'm just gonna be more loose. But I don't like them either because they're also annoying. I don't know. You just got to hit that Canadian sweet spot, Just be more like us. Everyone be more like Canadians and everything will be better. I don't know how I got off on that rant. It's been a long day, Ray.
Yeah.
Hey, do you think we should call you Blu-ray?
I don't think so.
Blue Ball Ray?
Yeah, I don't.
That's
think,
worse?
I don't think that's a good idea.
All right. Well, okay. I'm not going to push it.
My last pick is one that already a lot of people listen to. It's Sword and Scale. It's another true crime one. I like the format. I like that it's not about popular serial killers. Normally it's about like one crime, and it's explained like it's, I guess there's kind of a narrative, and then there's like usually 911 calls. There's usually some sort of a recording of, you know, court testifying and things of that nature. It's very well done. The guy who does it, I think his name's Mike as well. Fucking lot of Mikes. Anyway, the guy who runs it, whose name I can't remember, so go fuck yourselves, look it up. It's really well done. It's really well put together, and some of the episodes that you listen to, you're like, holy fucking shit. Like, that's fucking crazy. Like, I find myself at least every other episode going like, Jesus Christ, that's fucked.
Nice.
But it's good.
Man. I thought of another one. This actually might be, I just didn't really think of it as a podcast, I guess is why this didn't come to mind for me right away. But there's this like video wrestling podcast called OSW. It's like Old School Wrestling Review. And it's these three Irish guys. It's like, it's such a genius. It's so much work, but I love how they set it up where they take an old pay-per-view and like they did the David Arquette series, for instance. Like here's just every bad thing that David Arquette did in wrestling. They watch the old pay-per-views and review them, but then they add in the video for like everything that they're referencing so you can watch the horror or whatever. And they're just like, I don't know, there's something about people with accents. They're just funny. Irish accents, you know? It's gold.
They're just funny. That doesn't sound horrible or anything.
They're just like funny little lads. Funny little guys. And yeah, I think that's it. That's all I got in my brain.
Actually, you know what? I've got another one here. Hollywood and Crime, actually. Hollywood and Crime is really good. The whole first and I think almost all of the second season dealt with the Black Dahlia murder.
Right.
The Elizabeth Short murder, where they found her and her face was carved with the Glasgow smile, you know, and she was severed cleanly in two. And trying to figure out who might have done this, and a few people who were suspects and a few people who were taken in and then let go. You know, it really dealt with it, and it sounds like something that shouldn't be so drawn out, but it's worth a listen. Wondery, the production company that releases that podcast, as well as Sword and Scale, they have so many really good true crime podcasts, actually, that I could probably go on and list a ton of them, but we'll leave it at Sword and Scale, and the last one that I mentioned, whose name I can't remember all of a sudden. Oh, Hollywood and Crime.
Yeah, that's like interesting too, or maybe, yeah, like this kind of maybe is kind of a neat little bonus podcast to do just to point people towards stuff, because like I just never thought to look for crime podcasts, but apparently it's a deep fucking well. There's all kinds of shit. I just never looked into it.
You know what? There's a lot of them, but they're not all good.
Right.
Like they're some of them aren't even tolerable.
Yeah, there's
like,
some bad podcasts out there. Yeah, for sure.
No, there's one called, I think it's called Martinis and Murder. This is not a shout out.
You can go fuck yourself.
They are obnoxious to listen to.
I do find that sometimes if I'm trying a new podcast, I'll be walking down the street and I'll realize like I'm just frustrated, or I start thinking of people in my life that I don't know, insulted me 20 years ago, and I'm like, why am I even thinking about that? Why am I agitated? And then I realize it's like, oh, because these people talking in my ear are annoying little cuntbags. And then it's like, I gotta delete this.
Well, this podcast, Martinis and Murder, the co-hosts just irritated me, and it was right from the first episode. Like, I only listened to the one episode. I don't even know if they got better,
right?
Because they were talking about the Golden State Killer, which I've already mentioned earlier. This was just for a little background, this was a serial killer who broke into over 120 homes and robbed them, and he also raped more than 50 women and killed more than a dozen people, and got away with it basically for 40 years. Like, the man lived a long life. He's still alive. He's in custody now, but you know, he got married, he had children, he had grandchildren, he retired and then he was caught, because of DNA. Not DNA that he had submitted, but through genealogy websites, they managed to really narrow it down. And
Or where he really messed up was that time he jizzed on a police officer's face.
no, he left semen in victims.
Just all over the place.
Yeah, quite literally, he left DNA all over the place, but because he was once a police officer, he was not in the system.
Oh, shit.
Because this was before the time of DNA. The murders, the crimes spanned from the mid-'70s to the mid-'80s, before DNA technology had really advanced. There wasn't a DNA database at that point, so that's how he got away with it for over 40 years.
Man.
Anyway, the way Martinis and Murder spoke about these crimes, they just sounded so aloof, and they were making light of it and getting a couple of facts wrong. And right away, if you get a fact wrong and I fucking hear it, I'm out, I'm done, goodbye. But the fact that they were making jokes about shit, I'm like, you know what, fuck off.
Right. Yeah, this is your podcast is what it's supposed to be about.
You're talking about serious stuff that people who are into it want to hear serious people talk about. So go fuck those guys.
Yeah.
They can fuck off.
I wonder what the percentage is of good podcasts to bad. It's probably 1% good, right? There's a lot of that's the problem, I guess, with it being the problem and the benefit too. It's just anyone can do it. Awesome, but now everyone's doing it.
There's a guy from Poland who does a serial killer podcast, and it's actually called the Serial Killer Podcast. He's fun to listen to, but I find now the reason I don't listen to him is because he's always shilling, looking for donations, looking for Patreon, looking for, people to buy his merch and stuff. Even though he's talking about the stuff I want to hear about, I just don't want to hear someone asking for money basically every,
That was one of those things too. Podcasting, I guess it was more of a hobby back in the day, but now it is just an epidemic of this show is brought to you by MeUndies, and Lisa Mattresses. Use the code blah, blah, blah. And it's just every person. Come on.
I don't intend on, and I'm sure you're very similar, I don't intend on ever trying to make money off of this. I would like to make stickers. I would like to make some shirts, but I'm not going to force any of that shit on anyone.
Yeah, I think that's the difference. There's things that are cool. To have a t-shirt would be cool, and then if people bought it, that would be cool. To sell fucking socks is not cool. It's just
I know a couple
cherries,
podcasts
berries,
that,
whatever. I don't know.
True Crime All the Time and Criminology Podcast, they both shill or try to sell these socks called Bombas.
Right.
And they also try to get you to buy some Madison Reed hair color stuff. But usually they mention it once in the run of an episode for each thing, and then they move on. But the Serial Killer Podcast, they mention they've got a Patreon, they've got these things, plus they have the people that, or the companies rather, that they shill for, some flower delivery company, and, 1-800-Flowers or some such shit. And then, there's also something else. I think he does the Madison Reed one as well now.
That's one thing I always wonder, as I've never had a podcast popular enough for anyone to want to advertise on it, but I wonder how much, I just assume it must be a lot of money these people are getting offered to just fucking ruin their own podcast with all the shilling. But then I think, maybe it's not even that much money. Maybe they're just, willing to take it, But it really does, it just hurts maybe I'll eat these words someday if I'm an advertising little bitch boy, but it hurts the tone of the show so much to just
especially on a serial killer podcast.
Yeah.
Let's talk about socks and hair color. No, thank you.
Yeah, that was just brutal. I can't imagine ever. I guess it'd be different if I had kids in a house and a mortgage and stuff. I don't have shit, so I don't need to care about anything.
Well, like I said, my intent is to maybe make t-shirts one day and maybe make stickers. We'll get a shit ton of stickers made, and we'll get a few t-shirts made.
And that reminds me of...
And that's it.
What was it called? There was a wrestling podcast I used to listen to, but now I forget the name. But what they would do is, they would make limited runs of t-shirts, and they would just make really cool designs. Mm-hmm. And that's how they made their money. And they would, I mean, they were pretty popular, so they would sell like 2,000 of each of these shirts, but that's what they did. So it's like, yeah, like I do think there's a way to do that, like that you can make money and add something cool to the world, not make money, but also just ruin everyone's day with your fucking mattress commercials.
Yeah, like Andy or whatever. Like, I mean, the sad thing is that I just helped shill some of these companies. You know?
But that's the other thing. It's all the same. There's only like 8 different companies that advertise on every podcast, and it's like, for fuck's sake. Yeah, I'm not a fan.
But we're not gonna advertise for anyone. Like, aside from ourselves and the couple shout outs that we're doing now, like, that's it. Like,
by the way, have you heard about my enormous cock? If you go to
your mom
and then enter code fucking big cock,
you're bad at this.
Yeah. You can get 30% off my cock. I'll just send it to you. I'll cut off my own dick and I'll mail it to you. That's how much I care.
Wow, fuck, man. I have to go to your mom's just to get the rest of mine.
So yeah, this would be, someone can point back to this someday when we're, if we ever become big time and we fucking advertise every 10 fucking seconds.
I think when it gets to that point and it actually becomes something that you're doing because you have to, that it makes it less fun.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, you know, I tattoo. I know how to tattoo. I'm pretty good. I'm not great, but I'm good. What I do looks nice when it's done. If I had to do it every single day, I know I wouldn't like it.
Right. Yeah, and I think that is the trick too. I mean, with any kind of podcast thing, is that like, you can tell when it's somebody's job and you can tell when they actually like to do it, you know. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think it's probably never a thing we'll have to worry about getting popular. It's probably never going to happen. If it does, that's cool, but it's more important just that it's just fun to do.
Yeah, like, I mean, if this thing kind of goes the way I hope it'll go, then, you know, maybe we'll, like I've said before, maybe we'll get some t-shirts done. We'll sell those, like, but I mean, I'm not talking thousands of shirts. I'm talking, like, you know, get 100 t-shirts made, you know.
And that's what's cool about that wrestling podcast, whose name I still can't remember, is that, like, it's like a cool shirt design, you know. So it's like, it's not just people buying it to help your podcast, or even if they're fans of the podcast necessarily, it's because they want a cool looking t-shirt.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah.
And the podcast is kind of the platform to just be like, look at these cool shirts we made. I love that.
And we'll get stickers, but the stickers, you know, if someone wants one, we'll fucking get it to them. Like,
or we'll tell them where we stuck it. It's at the corner of Yonge and Eglinton. Just go get it. It's on the lamppost. That'd be awesome.
But yeah, I mean, the idea of this episode was just to basically shout out some podcasts that we really like, and we just kind of ended up going on a couple of tangents. But yeah, I mean, I'm happy with it. I recommend any of the podcasts that we listed. Give it a chance, if nothing else. Like, listen to a random episode or the first episode of each. If you like it, keep going. I mean, that's kind of the way it works.
Yeah.
If you don't like it, then you don't have to listen to it. But these are our recommendations for people that have found, listened to, and enjoy our particular podcast. So this isn't going to be a typical thing. We are going to do random bonus episodes here and there. This is just the first of these.
Yeah. Man, I do love to. I'm glad podcasting became a thing, because I remember when I worked up in a projection booth in Vancouver in like the mid-2000s, it was whatever year Clerks 2 came out, 2005. And I remember like I would download lectures from the teaching company and just listen to these like boring ass university lectures just because I had nothing else to do up there. And then when I finally found out about podcasting and like I don't know, Smodcast was one of the early ones, Kevin Smith's podcast and stuff, and it was just like awesome. Like, finally I can fill this time listening to stuff that I'm interested in, that I give a shit about. And I should mention, yes, Modcast, I've still listened to it. It's been 10 years, so I should give that a shout out. But yeah, it's just so great. Like, it is stuff that would never be on the radio. Or like when you hear a podcast about like the history of Bionic Commando or Mega Man, like, that's not going to be on the radio. But you can get it on the internet. And yeah, it's fucking, despite the fact that there's a lot of shitty, dumb podcasts, like, the overall phenomenon is great. It's just so awesome to be able to listen to just this weird shit that nobody would have ever talked about before.
And I'm glad that we are able to kind of not only talk about the movies and pop culture that we like, but maybe help the podcasts that we listen to kind of maybe gain some more followers. Because, I mean, if we've listed a podcast in a positive light on this episode, then it's because we really enjoy them and we think that they should have more exposure, even more than what they probably already have.
Yeah.
I guess that's our 2 cents about it.
And not bad. We were aiming for half an hour and we went like 45 minutes. So we did it.
Nice.
We overexposed ourselves.
We overachieved.
Yeah. Just like always.
Just like always.
Do you think it'll be too? I'm sure there's some people that'll hear this and, we're like, hey, fuck this type of podcast or fuck these guys. And they'll listen to us and be like, fuck those guys. Are you kidding? These 2 guys think they're good at this. These fucking annoying jerk-offs. But, hey, one guy's annoying jerk-off is the next guy's favorite podcast. So
that's right.
What can you do?
We are the Prison Wallets. This is our love letter to movies. My name's Ray.
I'm Keith.
You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Borahioro77, which is BOURAHIORO77.
And all of my fucking deets are at KeithCourage.com. Ever tell you the story of that website name? So, Keith Courage was an old TurboGrafx game.
I remember it.
But it's because I was going to get KeithMcNally.com, and some dude, as a joke, bought it before me, and then he emailed me. He's like, fuck you, I took KeithMcNally.com. And he was going to give it back to me, but then, I don't know, I just didn't want to... It's just like, fuck you. I don't even want to, grace you with the fact that I acted
that
like
you won for a minute.
Yeah, exactly. So my friend Matt was like, just call it Keith Courage. That's way cooler. And he is right. And it is way cooler. So now I got KeithCourage.com. KeithMcNally.com can fucking suck my dick.
Or maybe Keith McNally will just do it for him.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this is us, Ray and Keith, and fuck you all.
Yeah, until next time, fuck you all.
Fuck you all.
Hey, yo, it's Keith. I just want to record a quick little postscript. I thought of something else that it didn't come to mind when we were doing the episode because it's not really a podcast, it's a YouTube page. But there's this guy named Oliver Harper, dude from England, he's working on a documentary right now about 80s action movies. But he does these little retrospectives about movies, and it's just awesome. It's like, I just watched his Crow one the other day, where it'll be 12, 15 minutes, and he goes through the production of the movie, how it did on release, ancillary stuff, if there's video games and soundtracks, he covers that, stuff about sequels. Just a really great little capsule of oh yeah, fuck, I remember that movie. And you learn some neat shit, it's just great. And he does movie commentaries too, so Oliver Harper's Retrospectives on YouTube. Highly recommended. He's a good man. All right, that's it. Fuck you all. Thank you. Maybe I shouldn't say thank you after I say fuck you all. Takes the sting out a little bit.